So, fresh from the baptism that Jesus got from John the Baptist, Jesus starts gathering some of his disciples like we talked about last week. And at this point, normal life starts to continue for Jesus. And normal life starts to continue for the apostles, the first of the disciples. And, you know, sometimes we go through this big spiritual experience and we expect that this is going to be what it's going to be like from now on. But normal life comes on. You know, after we get that ecstasy of the high of living with Jesus, then we realize we've got to do the laundry. And the laundry stinks because we haven't done it in a week. And, you know, it's like, oh, I don't want to do this. Or it's like, then it's like, Jared, can you do the dishes? And they're like, I don't want to do the dishes. You're like, I've got this great spiritual life going on. I don't want to do the dishes. But you got to do the dishes. The dishes need done. You know, the apostles and Jesus, they go through normal life. They've got a wedding to go to. Okay, let's go to a wedding. So they go to a wedding. And, you know, weddings can be fun, you know, but it's normal life. You know, it's not doves flying down on people while they're getting baptized. Weddings are supposed to be normal. You know, we think of weddings as like one-day events, but 2,000 years ago, weddings were like week-long events, sometimes 2 weeks long. And so you'd get a little bit of food or a lot of food, and you'd spend a lot of money on food. You know, if you've got 200 people coming to your wedding, and you think, okay, I'm going to spend $10 a plate. Well, that's $2,000 so that everybody can have one meal. Well, back in the day, you had to figure out how to feed people for 2 weeks. You know, and it was supposed to be a party for 2 weeks. So it's like lots of food, lots of dip. You know, that's a lot of guacamole. And that's a lot of wine. You know, you got to keep a lot of wine. And wine's expensive. You know, so at this wedding, they ran out. It says, on the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "There you have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me? This ain't my problem." Jesus is like, I don't want to go to the grocery store. Jesus replied, "My hour has not yet come." See, Mary knew that he was capable of making wine appear out of nowhere. And Jesus didn't want to do it. And he said he didn't want to do it. And then Mary goes to the servants and says, "Do whatever he tells you." So he just says, "I don't want to do it." And then Mary goes out to the servants and say, "He's going to fix the problem. Don't worry about it." So now the pressure's on. He didn't want to start performing miracles publicly, but he wanted to honor his mother. And just because it wasn't Mother's Day, he still had to honor his mothers. So just because Mother's Day's over, we've still got to honor our parents. We've still got to honor our mothers. So Jesus did what she wanted. It says in verse 6, nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing. So the Jews had this tradition where before a meal, you'd take the water and you'd wash your hands. And it was turned into this religious ceremony. Later in his ministry, Jesus would argue against just following rules just because man says this is the rules. You know, we're supposed to listen to God. And just because man says this is the rule doesn't mean that's what the rule is. That doesn't mean you go out of your way all the time just to be like, well, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to listen to God. You know, sometimes we got to listen to what other people say. But sometimes Jesus makes a point. I'm not going to do it just because you say I got to do it. Jesus said to his servants, "Fill the water jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from. If he found out that what he was drinking came from where everybody was washing their hands, he probably wouldn't have drunk it. You know, have you ever seen water that is, you know, like everybody washes their hands and like the first time it looks kind of clean. After the 10th person washes their hands, you know, these guys are farmers, these guys are working with their hands all the time. The water looks nasty. You know, and it's like, I'm not going to drink that. What are you talking about? You drink that and I'm going to get salmonella or Ebola or something. I don't know what it's got in there. You know, E. coli or you know, what is that? West Nile virus. I don't know what it's got. It's nasty. I'm not going to drink that. What are you talking about? So the master of the feast didn't know where the water came from, and he drank it and it was wine. So often we don't realize where God's miracles came from. You know, a lot of the times we just think, okay, things work themselves out. You know, I'm just strolling along. That car missed me. That car missed me. And then you realize, okay, you're walking on a red light. And God saved you. Happened to me a couple of times. You know, because I'd be coming home from middle school. I'd have one of my books open. And I'd just be reading, and then I'd hear honking. What's all this honking about? And then I realize I'm in the middle of the street, and you know, their car is swerving to avoid me. You know, and it's like, okay, God provided for me. You know, God made me safe. You know, I need to be smart. So often we assume things just happen to work things out, and we don't take the time to recognize God's protection. But the waters turned into wine. Verse 9, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. This dude's about to drink this water that we've all been washing our hands in. You know, if I was one of the servants, I would have been like, I can't believe he's really going to drink this. You know, and then it's like, oh, he did it. Okay, so it's wine and it's great. And he said, everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now. So if you've got really expensive wine, you sip it and it just runs down you like water. And it's like, oh wow, this actually tastes good like grapes. It is pretty good wine. If it's really expensive wine. If it's cheap wine, you take a swig of it and it's like, you know, it's like, oh man, there's some bite to that. You know, and it almost feels like you're drinking something that's like got gravel in it. And so, if you're drunk, you don't realize, okay, this is cheap. You know, it'll just go down and you're like, I don't care, I'm drunk. So what they do is at the weddings, they bring out the good wine first, so it'd go down smoothly. And then once you had yourself a little tipsy, then they bring out the junk, because at that point you don't care. You know, if you're drunk, you don't care what you're drinking or what you're eating, or, you know, or pretty much you don't care what you're doing, you know, because you're drunk. So the wedding master is like, wow, usually people bring out the good wine first, but you guys saved the best till last. So God provides in this case. And so often God provides for us, and He doesn't just give us what we need. Sometimes He gives us the very best. I prayed for a good wife when I woke up. Not when I woke up. When I grew up, I was praying for a good wife. But God didn't provide me with just any wife. He provided me with the best wife. He provided me with the best woman. You know, and it wasn't just that God provided me with a church that one day I could minister to, but God provided me with exactly the kind of church that I wanted to minister to, because I wanted that small type of intimate environment where I could get to know the people that I'm ministering to, where I could develop friendships and have Pokemon battles and hang out with for hours and hours and hours every Sunday. I wanted to have a church, and I prayed for a church where I could be like all week long, I can't wait to go to church, I can't wait to go to church. And God gave me that with joy. And I'm just so happy to be here at Oasis. So when He provides, He often provides us with not just what we asked for, but He provides us with something so much more than what we asked, with something that's so much better than what we asked for. John 2:11, what Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs, the first of the miracles, the first of the wonders, the first of the supernatural signs which revealed His glory, and His disciples believed in Him. So Jesus was born of a virgin, and the Holy Spirit descended on Him in the form of a dove when He was baptized. So miracles had been done in Jesus' life before this, but this is the first of the signs that Jesus did to say, yo, I'm here, and I've got a mission from God to save mankind. Pay attention, dudes. So, you know those, like, you're driving down the road, and your parents are driving, and you're looking down, and it's nighttime, and you've got these neon signs, and they're red, and it says nails, and they're like, get your nails done here. You know, this is where you go to get your nails done, and you'll be happy. You know, we've got signs like this all over the place. You know, everywhere you go, there's like, spend money here, spend your time here, come to this activity. You know, everywhere we go, there are people that are using advertisements to get our attention. Jesus gets our attention with these miracles. Jesus gets our attention with this wine so that we can know that Jesus has something from God that we need to pay attention to. When God acts, He doesn't just send a dude out into the desert and say, okay, dude, tell everybody you're from me, and good luck with that, because you're going to need it. And I'd be like, You know, but if God sends His prophets, and if God sends His messengers and says, take your staff, and when Pharaoh denies that you come from God, put it down and it'll become a snake. And then they're going to be like, whoa, this dude's got a message. This dude's got a message. If you're just crying out, you need to forsake the Baals, and you need to worship the one true God. So let's see who is God. If it's Baal or if it's Yahweh. If it's Baal, let Baal send fire down from heaven and let him consume your sacrifices. So they cry all day and they slash themselves with their knives to try and get Baal's attention. Pay attention to me! And they cut themselves. That's what the false prophets would do to get attention. Kind of like how teenagers will cut themselves just to feel some pain. Maybe just to get some attention. Maybe just because they want to feel something. And the prophets of the Baals would cut themselves just so that they could feel something. Because they weren't getting anything from their God. Because the Baals were false gods. But Elijah, when he calls out for fire, God sends down fire and it consumes the sacrifice. And everybody gets down on their knees and they say, "The Lord is God." So Jesus turns the water into wine, and people say, "Okay, yeah, this is good wine." You know, God is working through Jesus. But our religions have their miracles. You know, every faith says they've got miracles. And these miracles are supposed to have happened long ago and far away. You know, we look at we look at this wedding, and we can easily think that this was long ago and far away, because it was long ago and far away to us. But to the disciples who were eyewitnesses to this, they were like, "Okay, this is unusual." They were eyewitnesses to this, and so they recorded it for us. But are miracles possible? Can God work in the universe? Can God change things? In the course of our ordinary lives, we don't see miracles. You know, we're going to school, we're going to work, we're doing our homework, and we'd like to see miracles. I remember one time I didn't do my science lab in 6th grade, and the whole recess I was like, "Okay, God, send the rapture, or send a plague, or do something so that I don't have to get an F for not doing my science lab." And God did not do anything for me. He let me fail. God didn't perform a miracle for me. And I was begging Him. I was pleading. I didn't want to fail. But He let me fail because I was lazy. I was irresponsible. I screwed up. It was my fault. And God let me get a bad grade in Mrs. P's class. I forget what her name was. It was like this long Greek name. And so we called her Mrs. P. Yeah, and that was always like, "Yeah, I'm Mrs. P." Yeah. That was kind of funny because I was in junior high. So I thought like a junior higher. You know, now that I'm in seminary, I still think like a junior higher a lot of the time. But the disciples were witnesses to these miracles. But how can we be sure that these things happened long ago and far away in the days of the Bible? Skeptics have argued that, well, maybe Jesus put some powder in the water and made it kind of taste like wine, which would have been a neat trick because, like I said, you know, everybody was washing their hands in this water, so it was really nasty. And then you put powder in a juice, you know, like you put it in Kool-Aid. Yeah, you put it in Kool-Aid. And if you just kind of dump it in there, you need to stir it up. You can't just say, "Okay, you go get the water." Jesus was never near the water to put any powder in it. So that doesn't really make any sense. But in general, are miracles even possible? Can God work? You know, so here's the argument. God made the world, God established all the laws, and then He just, poof, work, universe, and then He doesn't do anything. But that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. In the Bible it says that God sustains the universe. God created the whole universe. God created the whole laws. All the scientific laws that we have of gravity, of electromagnetism, of all these fancy terms that we have the privilege of studying about and looking through microscopes and looking through telescopes and learning about all these things, God put into place. So when we study science, we're studying the laws that God put in place. And if you make something, you can break something. If I make up a game and I say, okay, in this game, there's no standing up. Everybody's got to sit down. But if I own the copyright to the game, I can say, okay, I can put a back door into the game so that at certain points I can allow a cheat code to process so that I can stand up, so that I can do stuff. It's like when you've got your Pokemon game and you're only allowed to have one Master Ball, but then you put in a cheat code and you've got like infinite Master Balls and you can never run out of Master Balls. So it's like God's designed this universe, but He designed it with cheat codes so that when He wanted to intervene, He can change the software and say, okay, wine, there, now, done. Boom! Best wine in the house. Vintage 0. So God created the world and He programmed it so that, like our cheat codes with our Pokemon games, God can give Himself infinite Master Balls. He can make it so that He can change the program for the software of the universe when He wants to. So miracles are possible. There's no reason to think that miracles can't happen. God's infinite in power. He created the universe. If we believe that He created the universe, there's no reason to doubt that He could work in the universe that He created. So other religions claim to have had miracles long ago and far away. And whenever you see miracle claims coming up in other religions, they're always about something that happened long ago and far away. But what the disciples are talking about are things they saw, about things they were eyewitnesses to and recorded for us. Only Christianity and founded on the Jewish prophets has miracles that can be seen by people. All other religions have miracles that were made up by authors in a room somewhere about something that supposedly happened 200 years ago, according to my uncle, who heard it from his grandpa, who heard it from his drunk uncle, who heard it from his stoner cousin's roommate's best friend's brother. And so other religions don't have really credible miracles, but Christianity has miracles that people can see. Christianity has miracles that the disciples were like, whoa, this washing water, which looked really nasty coming into the banquet, suddenly tastes like the best wine I ever had in my life. Whoa. So in Christianity, we have the advantage of having miracles that are eyewitnesses can talk about. But if miracles are possible, and if miracles happen, then why don't we see them more often? So I want to go back to my first analogy, where God showed Moses, okay, throw your stick down, turns into a snake. Then what happened? The water of the Nile turned to blood. Then what happened? There were frogs everywhere. And Pharaoh's like, I don't want the frogs everywhere. Get the frogs away. And so Moses said, okay, tomorrow at 10 a.m., 10:05, let's say 10:05, frogs go away. So tomorrow at 10:05, frogs go away. The gnats show up. And the gnats show up, and Pharaoh's like, I don't like the gnats. The gnats are bad. I don't like the gnats. Yeah.
Weren't the gnats actually locusts?
There were gnats and there were locusts.
Oh.
So one plague was locusts. Locusts show up, gnats show up. Every time Moses says, okay, tell me the time, tell me the place, plague will be out of here. The point is, God wanted to show that He's in control of these things, that these aren't naturally occurring phenomena, that these aren't flukes of, okay, there was a volcano which dripped mud, which made the Nile look kind of reddish, which pushed the frogs out, which created some boils, which happened. You know, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that at all. Moses is like, okay, you tell me the time, you tell me the place, boom, plague's done. So God had specific control over the miracles. It wasn't like God sent the locusts out and then it's like, okay, we've got locusts and they're everywhere and we can't get rid of them. God had control of the plagues from the second they started to the second they finished. So what happens? The children of Israel, we're talking about millions and millions of people seeing all of this. And then Pharaoh finally says, okay, you can go. So the people leave. And millions of people hear God speak from Mount Sinai. And they're like, oh, there's a God up there. I'm afraid. And if I saw a mountain talking, I'd be pretty scared too. I'd be like, okay, mountain's on fire, not supposed to happen. Mountain's talking to me, not supposed to happen. Moses, I've got a great idea. You go up, you talk to God. This is too scary for me. I don't want to deal with this. What did the children of Israel do? Moses is on the mountain for so long. Let's build a calf. Let's worship the calf god. Are you serious? You just saw the plagues, you just saw the mountain talk, and now you're going to make an idol? Are you kidding me? Are you for real? Is this a joke? So they're like, okay, we're sorry. And all the people who sinned died because God was mad. And so they're going along for a couple of years, and they're like, I'm hungry. We've been walking for a long time, and I'm hungry. I want some meat. If only we were slaves in Egypt. Then we could have leeks and onions and garlic. And check it in the Bible, that's what they were really asking for. Leeks and onions and garlic. I mean, who wants to be a slave so that you could have leeks and onions and garlic? I mean, seriously. But these people were that crazy. And so God was like, okay, you want meat? I'll give you all the meat you can handle. So he sends so much quail that the quail's like 2 feet high. It's like the sand itself turned to quail. I mean, there was just like quail everywhere. Quail, 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 quail. And then the people were like, yay, meat. And then God was mad at them because they rebelled. And they rebelled and they saw him work. And they saw him work and they rebelled. And they rebelled and so God worked. And God worked and then they rebelled again. This goes on for 40 years. No generation of people saw more miracles than the children of Israel leaving Egypt. And yet, did they believe in God? No. I don't understand it. If I saw the things they did, I'd be like Joshua and Caleb. I'd be like, I'll do whatever you want, just don't hurt me. Just make the talking mountain stop. I'll do whatever it asks. It's a talking mountain. I can't compete with that. I don't want to get too complicated here. But if we saw the miracles that God did, we'd kind of just be like the people of Israel, because normal life just kind of happens. We go through these spiritual mountain experiences. We go through these great peaks of, yes, I was at summer camp and I had so much fun and I love Jesus and I can't stop loving Jesus. And then normal life just kind of happens. And we get tired. And we want to skip our homework. Even though we know God wants us to learn things. And we don't want to do what our parents say because our parents, they're telling us to pick up our room. And so I know Mother's Day was last week, but that was last week. You know, it so quickly we just are like, okay, sermon was great, sermon was encouraging. Now it's lunchtime and we get to chat and we get to have fun and we get to forget everything that Pastor Jim's talking about so quickly. So quickly, I'll finish talking about respecting each other. And the next thing I know, Jim is a murderer, Jim is a murderer. And it's like, I was just preaching about respect. That was like 5 minutes ago. That was like maybe 3 minutes ago, and they're already chanting Jim is a murderer. And it's fun. And I'm not saying this to condemn us, I'm just saying we're human. You know, I do the same things. Pastor, I go to my seminary professors and they tell me, yes, Jim, you should do this and you should follow after God. And I say, yes, professor, that's very good advice. I say, yes, pastor, that's very good advice. The next thing I know, I'm on the road, and I'm like, get out of my way! What are you doing? And it's like, I had just had this mountaintop spiritual experience, and I'm already cussing out the person in front of me because he's going 25 miles an hour in a 45-mile-an-hour zone, and I just want to go 50 miles an hour because you can fudge 5 miles an hour before the cops start really paying attention. If there's any cops watching this video, hopefully you don't work in Saratoga. But they still rebelled. People still rebel. People just do it. When God gives much signs, He requires much. When God performs His miracles as great evidence that He's at work, He expects great responsibility and great accountability because we've been entrusted with a great gift of His miracles being at work. And we can't handle it. Look at Ananias and Sapphira. They saw the miracles of the apostles. They saw the miracles of the Jesus. And they still lied about how much they were giving to the church. And Jesus killed them. Christians. Man, I don't want that kind of accountability. I don't think I would have lived long had I lived in the days of the Exodus. I don't think I would have lived long had I lived in the days of the apostles. When God works His miracles among us, which He does do to show that He is at work, but there's great responsibility and there's great accountability. And so rather than putting on that on us, God gives a light touch to the world, because to whom much has been given, much will be required. But to whom little is given, little will be required. So God doesn't always give us His miracles because we aren't responsible enough to handle it. Because we screw up. I'd screw up. I screw up the second I'm out of church. You know, it's like, okay, I can go now. And then the next thing I know, there's a person honking behind me because he had to slam on his brakes because I thought I could make it into that turn. I don't mean to drive that way. It just happens sometimes. We don't mean to be lazy with our homework. It just tends to happen. We don't mean to want to sleep in. It's just easier to curse the alarm and go to sleep. You know, it's not... Who here wakes up and thanks the alarm for going up? Really? You go to bed early, right? No?
11.
You're weird. No, that's good. That's good that you wake up and I couldn't do that. My alarm goes off and I hit it like 20 times before I'm ready to wake up, because I just want to sleep in. Even when I'd have to wake up at like 1 p.m. because I had an all-night shift, I'd still be like, ugh, just hit the alarm. It's just, I don't want to wake up yet. I'm just not good with waking up. But that's good. I guess we all have our battles, some things we don't struggle with. For me, waking up's always been one of those struggles. But God does continue to work His miracles today. He sustains the universe that's around us. When we see a baby born, when we see a wedding happen, we can recognize that there's something special about this. That there's something that's unique about this. God works His miracles today. It says whenever there's a new believer, that it's a new creation, that God had to supernaturally intervene to make us a Christian because we're a new creation. So every new believer is a new miracle. But we've got even greater miracles that we're all going to see. And it's going to happen when God prepares us. When we go to be with Jesus, we're going to see Jesus for all eternity. We're going to see His miraculous presence for all eternity. And we're going to have that benefit, but we'll be ready for it, so God won't have to kill us when we get there. So there are a lot of miracles that are possible that continue in small ways even to this day. But there are even greater miracles that God's prepared for us in the future, so that we could continue to see His presence, so that we continue to live in His presence. What is that sound?
Someone's sawing something.
Somebody sawing something?
Nope, someone's killing a duck.
So yeah, I hear that, and yeah, I've got a picture of a rubber ducky and my dog just chewing at it, Anyways, that's just the mental image I've got. It just sounds like a chew toy, a really loud chew toy. Okay, so it's 2:15, so I'm going to close this up. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank You for this opportunity that we have to come together and to learn a little bit about You and to enjoy Your presence. Jesus, I want to pray that You would bless the food that we're about to share together. In Jesus' name, amen. All right.